Good day, everyone. Our topic is all about the Altman Z-score, other versions of Altman Z-score or the Z-score plus, and band rating equivalent. Altman Z-score is a model developed by finance professor Edward Altman to measure the financial stability of companies. This Altman Z-score was introduced as a way of predicting the probability that a company would collapse or be bankrupt in the next 2 years by using multiple balance sheet values or corporate income. There are C-series score formula. The original Altman Z-score formula was designed for public manufacturing companies, but eventually Professor Edward Altman released other versions that are designed for private companies, non-manufacturers, and emerging markets. But before we discuss the C-series score formula, let's talk about first the five financial ratios in C-score. Basically, these financial ratios comprises the C-score formula. As you can see here, we have the X1, X2, X3, X4, and X5. So these symbols represent certain financial ratios that needs to be calculated in order to solve for the C-score. So X1 can be calculated by getting the working capital divided by total assets. Working capital can be calculated by getting the current assets minus current liability. X2, retained earnings divided by total assets. X3, the earnings before interest and taxes divided by total assets. X4, the equity's market value divided by total assets. So for equities market value, it can be calculated by getting the shares outstanding, then multiply it by market price. Or you can also use the market capitalization since it is of the same value with the equities market. Then last, we have the X5, which is the total sales divided by total assets. First, we have the Altman Z-score formula for the public manufacturing companies. We have here the formula itself and the financial ratios that needs to be calculated. And on the other side, we have here the Z-score interpretation. If it is below 1.81, meaning that the company is in the distress or red zone, and it has high probability of bankruptcy. If it is between 1.81 and 2.99, the company is in the gray zone and it has moderate chance of filing for bankruptcy. And if it is above 2.99, the company is in the safe zone and it is unlikely for them to file for bankruptcy. For example, we have here the financial statements of Toyota. We will be using the year 2019. So I already highlighted the components that we will be using to solve for the Z-score, which are the total current assets, 18.8 million, total assets, 51.9 million, total current liabilities, 18.2 million, total liabilities, 31.3 million, retained earnings, 21.9 million, net revenues, 30.2 million, interest expense, 28,000, income before income taxes, 2.2 million. So after getting those values, all we have to do is to substitute it to the formula. So for X1, as stated in the formula, it is calculated by getting the working capital, which is total current assets, 18.8 million minus total current liabilities, 18.2 million divided by total assets equals 0.01. For X2, we get the retained earnings of 21.9 million divided by the total assets, 51.9 million equals 0.42. X3, we get the EBIT, which is the 2.2 million plus interest expense of 28,000 divided by interest expense of 28,000, then divided again by the total assets of 51.9 million equals 0.16. Then for X4, we use here the market capitalization instead of the market value. We have the 25.9 trillion divided by total liabilities of 31.3 million equals 0.83. And X5, which is the sales, 30.2 million divided by the total assets, 51.9 million, equals 0.58. After calculating for the values of the financial ratios, we substitute it to the formula. Z is equals to 1.2 times X1, which is 0.01, plus 1.4 times 0.42, plus 3.3 times 0.16, plus 0.6 times 0.83, plus 1.0 times 0.58, we get an answer of 3.404, meaning that the company is in the safe zone. Next, we have the Altman Z-score formula for private companies. We have here the formula itself and the financial ratios that we need to compute. The only difference of this formula compared to the public manufacturing companies is the calculation of the export. So as you can see here, it is calculated by getting the market value of equity, while in the private manufacturing companies, it is calculated by getting the book value of equity. So to get the book value of equity, we need to look for the total assets minus total liabilities. Also, it has its own interpretation of Z-score. If it is below 1.23, meaning that the company is in the red zone or distress zone, between 1.23 and 2.99, the company is in the gray zone, and if it is more than 2.99, the company is in the safe zone. For example, we have here the Toyota financial statements in year 2019, and we will be using the same components, which are the total current assets 18.8 million, total assets 51.9 million, total current liabilities 18.2 million, total liabilities 31.3 million, retained earnings 21.9 million, total revenues 30.2 million, interest expense 28,000, income before taxes 2.2 million. Then the same process, all we have to do is to substitute it to the formula. So for X1, we have 18.8 million minus 18.2 million divided by 51.9 million. We get an answer of 0.01. X2, the retained earnings of 21.9 million divided by total assets 51.9 million equals 0.42. X3, which is the EBIT divided by total assets, 2.2 million plus 28,000 divided by 28,000 divided by 51.9 million equals 0.16. Then for the X4, we compute here the book value, which is the total assets of 51.9 million minus total liabilities, then divide it by total liabilities of 31.3 million. We get an answer of 0.66. And last, we have the X5, which is the sales, 30.2 million divided by total assets of 51.9 million, we get an answer of 0.58. After calculating for the financial ratios, we substitute it in the formula. We have the C is equals to 0.72 times X1, which is 0.01, plus 0.84 times 0.42 plus 3.107 times 0.16 plus 0.42 times 0.66 plus 1.0 times 0.58, we get an answer of 1.71, meaning that the company is in the gray zone and it has moderate chance of filing for bankruptcy. So that is the end of my discussion. For the continuation of the report, it will be discussed by Crisel Halierina.